I never believed a coffin could open by itself, until the night I saw the soil moving under the moonlight. My name is Ethan, and I'm the night watchman for Oak Grove Cemetery. It's not a job you brag about. It's the kind of job you take, because you're broke, your student loans are a screaming chorus in your head, and the night shift pays a $2 differential. The silence was supposed to be a perk. No boss, no customers, just me, my thermos of bitter coffee, and the dead, the most well-behaved residents in all of Savannah, Georgia, or so I thought. The first time I noticed it, I wrote it off. A sunken patch on a fresh grave, probably just the dirt settling. It was the Abernathy plot, a newer section. But the next night, the patch was bigger, a messy, disturbed mound like a gopher had gone berserk. Except there are no gophers in Oak Grove. The grounds are immaculate thanks to Old Man Jenkins, the groundskeeper who's been here since, I swear, some of these people were buried. I filled it in, my boots sinking into the soft, cool earth, a strange sense of violation prickling my neck. The next night, it was worse. And it was always the same grave. A simple weathered headstone so old the limestone was porous and soft, the name almost erased by a century of humid southern air and acidic rain. I'd finally made out the inscription, Eleanor Vance, beloved daughter, 1832 to 1854. Asterisk. The dates meant nothing to me. Then it became a ritual. My rounds would end at Eleanor's grave, and every single time, the earth would be churned up. I'd fill it, tamp it down with the back of my shovel, and by the following dusk, it would be excavated again. No animal tracks, no signs of a prank, just this persistent, silent effort from 6 feet under. It's settling, Officer Ramirez said, his patrol car idling at the cemetery gates one evening. He gave me a look that was equal parts pity and boredom. You spend 10 hours a night in a place like this, your mind starts writing checks your eyes can't cash, kid. You're seeing things. But I wasn't. The evidence was there, under my feet. My skepticism, a shield I'd carried my whole life, was beginning to rust through. That's when I met Claire. She was a splash of vibrant life in the sea of gray stone, a university student with a binder full of plastic-sleeved maps and eyes that sparkled with intellectual curiosity. She was researching burial customs for her thesis. "You're the night watchman?" she asked, her voice cutting through the thick moss-hung silence. "Ethan, right? Mr. Jenkins said I should check in with you." I grunted, trying to play it cool, but I was pathetically grateful for a living, breathing conversation. I found myself leading her to Eleanor's grave. She ran her fingers over the eroded name, her brow furrowed. Eleanor Vance, 1854. That was the year of the yellow fever outbreak. They lost a third of the city. She chewed her lip, thinking. They buried people fast. Sometimes. Too fast. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. "What do you mean, too fast?" Before she could answer, a gravelly voice cut through the air. "Means they made mistakes." Old Man Jenkins emerged from behind a towering obelisk, his overalls stained, with grass and earth, his face a roadmap of wrinkles. He looked from me to Claire, his eyes narrowed. "That's not a story for this place. Not while the sun's going down. What kind of mistakes?" I pressed, the image of the disturbed soil burning. In my mind, Jenkins spat a stream of brown tobacco juice onto the grass, the kind where the doctor's too tired to tell a coma from a corpse. The story goes, the Vances lost their daughter. They buried her in her best Sunday dress. A day later, the family's servant was straightening the daughter's room and found a note, scribbled on the back of a hymnal. It just said, "I can hear the birds." Claire gasped softly. She was alive. The father, mad with grief, had the grave reopened. Jenkins continued, his voice low. The coffin lid. It was scratched to splinters on the inside. Her fingertips were just bone. He shook his head, a deep old sadness in his eyes. "Some ground just won't hold a restless soul. This one, she's still trying to get out." He shuffled away, leaving Claire and me in a silence that was now deafening. The theory was insane, impossible, but it was the only thing that fit. That night, The air was different. A thick, soupy fog rolled in from the river, swallowing the headstones and making the flickering old lamps into hazy, dying stars. The humidity was a physical weight. I stood at the edge of Eleanor's grave. It was, of course, disturbed again. But this time I didn't reach for my shovel. I knelt. I put my ear to the ground, and I heard it. A faint, dry, relentless scritch. Scritch, scritch, like a branch scraping a window pane. But it wasn't a branch. It was the unmistakable, horrifying sound of fingernails, worn to the quick, dragging and scraping against unyielding wood. My blood turned to ice. Ramirez was wrong. Jenkins was right. This wasn't paranoia. It wasn't settling. It was a nightmare happening in real time, under 200 years of Georgia clay. I stumbled back, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I had to tell someone. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I was about to call the station, demand Ramirez get down here, when a movement caught my eye. It was Mrs. Dorsey. She was a regular, a widow who came every evening to talk to her husband Arthur, whose plot was 3 rows over from Eleanor's. She was placing a fresh bundle of daisies on his stone, her head bowed. She didn't see what I saw. The soil on Eleanor's grave wasn't just disturbed. It was shifting. It bulged slightly, then collapsed as if something was pushing up from beneath. The scritching sound grew louder, more frantic. It was a sound of pure primal panic, a sound that had been echoing unheard for 170 years. Mrs. Dorsey. My voice was a strangled croak, lost in the fog. Get back. She didn't hear me. She finished her prayer, kissed her fingers and pressed them to the cold marble. And that's when the ground gave way. It wasn't an explosion. It was a collapse. A section of earth, right over the coffin, sank inward, creating a dark, yawning mouth about a foot wide. From that black hole the scratching stopped. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the sound. Mrs. Dorsey finally heard the collapse and turned, her face puzzled. Then, a hand shot out of the hole. It was not a skeletal hand, not a thing of bone. It was shrouded in the rotten remnants of fabric, the skin beneath a leathery stained parchment, stretched taut over bone. The fingers, tipped with broken, dirt-packed nails, curled and uncurled, grasping blindly at the empty, foggy air. It was a hand that had been working in the dark for centuries, and it was finally free. Mrs. Dorsey's puzzled look melted into a mask of pure, uncomprehending horror. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The hand flailed, searching. Its grasping fingers found the bouquet of daisies she had just laid. The brittle fingers closed around the fresh, vibrant stems, and as we watched, the flowers withered. Their bright yellow centers turned ashen gray, their white petals shriveled and blackened, crumbling to dust in seconds. The life was sucked out of them in an instant. The grave wasn't just restless. It was hungry. The hand, momentarily sated by the meager offering, retreated slowly back into the earth. The soil around the hole trembled and then was still, leaving only a void of darkness and the smell of freshly turned earth and rot. Mrs. Dorsey finally found her voice, a high, thin wail that tore through the cemetery's silence. I couldn't move. I could only stare at the grave, at the black hole that led to a horror I could not unsee. The ritual was broken. It wasn't about escaping anymore. It was about feeding. And I was the only one who knew. I was the night watchman, the guardian of the gate, and the only thing standing between a centuries-old hunger and the unsuspecting world above. My shift, I realized with a dread that hollowed me out, was just beginning. The filling of the grave was no longer a duty. It was a containment, and I had to make sure it never ever got out again. I thought it was kids messing around until the voices started calling me by name from the graves. The sound was a dry rustle at first, like dead leaves skittering across granite. We all heard it. Mike, ever the alpha, puffed out his chest and yelled into the oppressive dark, "Real funny, guys. Show yourselves." His voice, usually a booming stadium roar, was swallowed whole by the cold Chicago night. We were 5 idiots in a forgotten pocket of the city, the old St. Ignatius Cemetery, a place where the dead were supposed to be sleeping, not speaking. It was Eric's idea, of course. Eric, the law student, whose anxiety was a live wire constantly, sparking behind his glasses. He'd read about the redevelopment project in the Tribune, about the city council's fight to exhume and relocate the remains. One last night, he'd said, his fingers tapping a frantic rhythm on his knee. Before the bulldozers sanitize the history, it's a piece of Chicago's soul. Mike, always up for a dare, especially one that involved a case of cheap beer and an audience, had immediately agreed. Sarah, the nursing student, came for the same reason she did everything, to keep us all from accidentally killing ourselves. James, my boyfriend the mechanic, a skeptic who believed in wrenches and torque, not ghosts, came because I did. And I, Tiffany the bartender, I came for the story. For the thrill of it. For the first few hours, it was exactly that. A thrill. We'd propped our flashlights up on a crumbling angel-topped monument, creating a shaky circle of light in the vast, consuming blackness. Empty beer cans littered the base of a headstone so worn smooth by time and acid rain that the name was just a ghost of a memory. The air tasted of urban decay, damp earth, old stone, and the distant metallic tang of the L train. Mike was in the middle of a ridiculously exaggerated ghost story, one where he, naturally, fought off a horde of zombies with a tire iron, when the rustling came again. Closer this time. Wind, James stated, his voice a low, comforting rumble. He put a heavy arm around my shoulders. Just the wind through the gate. The old iron entrance was a skeleton behind us, its bars rusted into jagged teeth. But the rustling coalesced. It became a whisper, a susurration of sound that seemed to rise not from around us but from below. From the ground we sat on. Okay, Not funny, Sarah said, her rational voice tight. She hugged her knees to her chest. Eric, did you tell someone we were coming out here? Eric's face was pale in the flashlight beam. No. No one. Then it spoke. Not a whisper, but a voice. Cracked and parched, like dirt being turned over with a shovel. It came from the grave directly behind Mike. Michael. We all froze. Mike's bravado shattered. His head whipped around, his eyes wide. Who said that? The voice was ancient, devoid of breath, yet perfectly clear. The scholarship wasn't merit, Michael. You know that. Your father paid off the scout. He paid him $10,000 to look the other way on the failed drug test. The blood drained from Mike's face. He looked like he'd been sucker punched. That was a secret. A dirty, shameful family secret buried under a mountain of lies and his father's money. No one knew. No one. A collective paralysis held us. The air grew colder, so cold I could see my own breath pluming in the flashlight's beam. Then another voice. This one from a sunken patch of earth to my left. It was the weepy, desperate voice of a young woman. Sarah. My dear, you tried so hard to save me. Sarah flinched as if struck. Her hand flew to her mouth. The old woman in 4B, the grave voice crooned. The one you lost last week during your clinicals. You still feel the crack of her ribs under your palms, don't you? You blame yourself, you shouldn't. I was already gone. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She'd called me sobbing about that last week. She'd never told a soul the specific gut-wrenching detail of the CPR. The sound of breaking bones. Chaos erupted. We scrambled to our feet, a jumble of panic and disbelief. Eric was hyperventilating, backing away towards the broken gate. They're in the ground. They're in the ground, he shrieked. A third voice, gravelly and harsh, slithered from a plot marked only by a rough, unhewn rock. James. James stood his ground, but his face was a mask of confusion and dawning horror. His skepticism was a dam cracking under a horrific flood. You tell everyone your father left when you were 6? The voice grunted, a sound of labor and pain. A simpler story than the truth. You found him, didn't you? In the garage, the hose from the exhaust. You were the one who opened the door. The smell of gas and regret. It never leaves your clothes. Even now, James made a small, broken sound in the back of his throat. He'd never told me that. He'd never told anyone. He looked at me, his eyes begging me to unhear it, and I knew with a sickening certainty that it was true. This was no joke. This was an exhumation of the soul. The dead beneath us weren't just bones. They were archives of shame, witnesses to every hidden sin we thought we'd buried. The redevelopment wasn't disturbing their peace. It was giving them one last chance to speak their truths, to use our own as their currency. Then the voice came for me. It didn't come from one specific grave. It seemed to rise from the very soil. A chorus of dry, earthy tones that knew me intimately. Tiffany. Adventurous Tiffany. You run so fast, so far from everything. You think your life is an exciting story to be told. But some stories are prisons. I wanted to clamp my hands over my ears, to scream, to run. But I was rooted. The phone call. The voices hissed in unison. The night your mother called, her voice slurred with pills and wine, begging you to come home. You told her you were busy. You served another round of gin and tonics and laughed with a stranger while her words faded into a dial tone. The story you never tell, the adventure you didn't take. It was your last chance. And you chose the bar. A sob ripped from my throat. It was my deepest, most private guilt, the anchor that held my adventurous spirit tethered to the ocean floor of my own failings. The voices rose around us, a cacophony of revelations, a symphony of despair, from unmarked graves, holding victims of forgotten crimes and long-ago sorrows. They knew us, they were us. Mike was the first to break. With a strangled cry, he turned and ran blindly into the darkness, crashing through dead brush, not caring where he was going as long as it was away. Mike, Wait! Sarah yelled, her nurse's instinct kicking in through her terror. She stumbled. After him. Eric wasn't moving. He was on his knees, rocking back and forth, listening to a voice only he could hear, whispering secrets about his future, about failures yet to come. No, please stop. He moaned. Eric, we have to go, James roared, grabbing my hand. His was icy cold. He pulled me towards the gate, but I looked back. Eric. I screamed. He didn't look up. He just kept rocking. The voice from the grave at his knees was a lawyer's precise, damning monotone, listing every mistake, every cut corner, every ethical lapse he'd ever committed in his studies. It was killing him with the truth. We left him there. The three of us, James, Sarah, and I, staggered out of the cemetery and into the bleak, gray light of dawn. We didn't speak. We just ran, the whispers clinging to our clothes like grave dust. The police found Eric at noon. He was catatonic, curled in the fetal position between two headstones. He hasn't spoken a word since. They broke ground on the condos last month. Mike dropped out of school and joined a monastery out west. Sarah switched her major from nursing to accounting. She can't stand the sound of a human heart anymore. James and I. We didn't break up, but we're broken. We lie in bed at night, not touching, listening. The secrets the dead gave us hang in the silence between us, thick and suffocating, and sometimes when the wind blows just right through our apartment window, or when the radiator pipes knock, we hear it. A dry rustle, a whisper. It's not the wind. It's an invitation. A reminder that the graves in St. Ignatius were just one address. The dead, it seems, have our forwarding information, and they're not finished talking. The police report said no child was buried there, but I saw him every night standing by the same grave. It started in that liminal space between day and night, that hour when Brooklyn's industrial groan seems to soften and the ancient oaks of Greenwood Cemetery become a stark, silent cutout against the fading sky. My evening run is my religion, my path a concrete ribbon that skirts the cemetery's spired iron fence. It's a place of peace, a vast green lung in the middle of the borough, a repository of silent stories. I never felt afraid, until I saw him. He was small, no more than 5 or 6, a pale smudge in the gathering dusk. He wore a little suit, the kind you see in sepia-toned photographs, short trousers, knee socks, and a jacket that seemed too formal, Too antiquated for a child. Playing among the dead, he was always there, just inside the fence, his small hand resting on the worn white marble of a lamb-topped headstone. The first time I stopped, my breath pluming in the chill air. "Hey, sweetie," I called out, my voice too loud in the quiet. "Are you lost?" "It's getting dark." He turned his head. His face was pale, his eyes dark pools I couldn't quite make out from that distance. He didn't speak, just looked at me with an expression that was neither sad nor fearful, but profoundly empty. Then a low tendril of mist, the kind that slinks off the damp grass as the temperature drops, curled around the base of the grave. When it cleared a second later, he was gone. I told Daniel that night over takeout Thai. "Probably just a kid from the neighborhood playing a weird game," he said, logical to a fault. "Daniel teaches high school physics. His world is governed by immutable laws. Those old graves can look like fun climbing toys. The mist, the shadows. Your mind fills in the blanks, Amanda." He squeezed my hand. "You've been working too hard on that branding project. Your imagination is in overdrive. But he wasn't there. He didn't see the utter stillness of the boy, the way his clothes were wrong, a costume from another time. The next night, I saw him again. And the next. Same time, same grave, same vanishing act. My curiosity curdled into a low, persistent dread. I started taking my phone on my runs, using the zoom to read the inscription on the grave he favored. The marble lamb was chipped, its face eroded by a century of acid rain, but the words below were still legible. Elias Hargrove. Beloved son. 1917-1923. A light gone out. Too soon. Back in my apartment, surrounded by the sleek, modern furniture Daniel and I had chosen together, the name felt like an ice cube down my spine. 1923. 100 years. I poured a glass of wine and fell into an internet rabbit hole. The Brooklyn Historical Society's digital archives had a single chilling mention. Elias Hargrove, age 6, died of accidental drowning in the Gowanus Canal. The brief article noted the tragic misadventure of a child who had wandered from his home on a foggy evening. It felt thin. The Gowanus was a mile away. How does a 6-year-old, in a little suit, just wander that far and drown? That's when the sound started, not in the cemetery. Here, in my home. It would begin just as I was drifting to sleep. The faint crystalline sound of children's laughter. It wasn't joyful. It had a mocking, secretive quality, like a game I wasn't invited to play. I'd sit bolt upright, my heart hammering, against my ribs, and the sound would stop, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator. "It's the pipes," Daniel said, his voice thick with sleep. "Or the neighbor's TV. Go back to sleep, love. Then came the footprints. I woke to find them one morning. A trail of small, damp, muddy prints leading from the front door, which was locked and bolted, across the hardwood floor of the living room, stopping abruptly in the center of the room. The mud was black, thick, and smelled of the canal. Of decay. That was the end of logic for me. I went to Mrs. Kaplan next door, an elderly woman who kept her door on the chain and her windowsills lined with tiny blue glass eyes to ward off the evil one. She listened to my fractured story, her own eyes wide. "A Dybbuk," she whispered, the words slithering into the space between us. "A lost soul. He is not buried right, this child. He is not at peace. He has followed you home. He thinks you see him. He thinks you can help." Her superstition felt more real, more true than Officer Miller's patronizing dismissal when I filed a report. "Ma'am," he said, not even looking up from his computer. "Greenwood's records are meticulous. There's no record of any disturbances, no missing children. And as for the footprints, kids prank each other all the time. You sure your fiancé doesn't have a nephew with a key?" I felt utterly alone, tethered to a ghost. The laughter grew louder. I'd find my things moved. A hairbrush on the kitchen counter, a book left open on the floor. The air in my apartment grew perpetually cold. My only lead was the grave. On a drizzly Saturday, I went back in the daylight armed with the name. I found a teenager, Jordan, volunteering with a gardening group, restoring old sections. When I mentioned Elias Hargrove, his face lit up. The Gowanus Canal kid? Yeah, I know the story. It's kind of a local legend. The official story is Bunk.he led me to a small maintenance shed, pulling out a folder of photocopied old news clippings. The family was rich, industrialists. The father was under investigation for some shady business practices, fraud, embezzlement. The rumor, Jordan said, his voice dropping, is that the boy didn't wander off. The theory at the time was that he was silenced, that he saw or heard something he shouldn't have. The drowning was a cover-up. The investigation was hushed up. Money and power, you know. A light gone out too soon. Not an accident. A murder. That night, I didn't run. I walked straight to the fence as the fog began to coil around the headstones. And he was there. Elias. He wasn't just still this time. He was looking for me. His dark eyes locked onto mine. This time I didn't call out. I didn't ask if he was lost. I knew what he was. I slipped through a gap in the fence I'd never dared use before, my heart a wild drum in my chest. The damp grass soaked through my sneakers. The city sounds faded, replaced by a silence so profound I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I stopped a few feet from him, from the small white lamb. The air crackled with a terrible cold. Elias, I whispered, my voice breaking. I know what happened to you. He didn't vanish. He looked at me, and for the first time, his expression changed. The emptiness filled with a bottomless, century-old sorrow. The mist around us thickened, but it didn't obscure him. It showed me. For a split second, the tidy suit was replaced with the vision of sodden, filthy wool, his skin tinged blue, riverweed tangled in his hair. The smell of the canal of rot was overwhelming. And then a new sound woven into the silence. Not laughter. A man's voice, low and frantic, whispering threats. The sound of a struggle. A small, muffled cry. Then a splash echoing from 100 years away. It wasn't an accident. He was right. The police report, then and now, was wrong. Tears streamed down my face, warm against the chill. I'm so sorry, I choked out. I'm so sorry no one listened. I'm sorry no one found you in time, but I see you. I hear you. The image of the drowned boy flickered and was gone. The little boy in the suit stood before me again. He lifted a small, pale hand and pointed not at his grave, but at the larger ornate obelisk 20 yards away, the Hargrove family plot. Then he looked back at me. And for one fleeting, impossible moment, there was a look of gratitude in those deep, dark eyes. He faded then, not into mist, but into a soft, golden light that seemed to emanate from the marble lamb itself before winking out. The oppressive cold lifted. The eerie silence was broken by the distant honk of a taxi. The cemetery was just a cemetery again. I never saw Elias again. The laughter in my apartment stopped. The footprints never returned. The police won't reopen a century-old case based on a ghost story, and I don't expect them to. Some truths aren't for courtrooms. They're for the living to remember and the dead to finally release. I still run by Greenwood. Sometimes I stop at the fence. I look at the small white lamb and the grand gilt-ridden obelisk, and I say his name into the twilight. I am the keeper of his story now. And in the quiet, I like to think that a little boy, lost for 100 years, has finally stopped wandering. He's just gone home.